Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're diving into a section of the Bible, Acts chapter 12, verses 1 through 25.
Oh, okay.
It's a part of the Bible that's absolutely bursting with drama.
Right.
We're going to try to unpack what happened to James, Peter, Andy, King Herod.
Uh-huh.
And let me tell you, it's a wild ride.
It is.
We've got an execution,
Wow.
a prison break that would make Houdini jealous, and a king who meets a rather unfortunate end.
Oh, yeah.
So luckily, I've got an expert with us who can help us navigate all this history and stuff.
I bet.
So are you ready to explore?
Absolutely. It's a fascinating chapter packed with action
Yeah.
and intrigue. It really captures those challenges and triumphs
Yeah.
of the early Christian church.
So first,
Right.
let's set the stage.
Yeah.
We're introduced to King Herod. But hold on, not just any Herod, right?
Right. This is Herod Agrippa I.
Okay.
Now, he's the grandson of Herod the Great, the one we hear about in the Christmas story.
Right.
But unlike his grandfather, Agrippa was known for trying to please the Jewish people.
Right.
This, unfortunately, led him down a dark path,
Mm-hmm.
persecuting Christians to win favor.
Wow, talk about family drama.
Yeah.
So this Herod was walking a tightrope,
Yeah.
trying to maintain power
Right.
while appeasing different groups.
Uh-huh.
And then, bam, the text hits us
Yeah.
with some heavy news. James, the brother of John,
Right.
is executed by Herod.
It's a stark reminder of the dangers
Yeah.
faced by early Christians.
Well, I mean, imagine James was one of Jesus's closest disciples,
Absolutely.
someone who witnessed the miracles
Right.
and teachings firsthand.
Yeah.
And just like that, he's gone.
I know. It's incredible.
But it must have sent shockwaves
It would have.
through the entire community.
Yeah.
You know, reading this, it's easy to think, okay, Herod was ruthless.
Right.
But what was the strategy
That's a great point.
behind his persecution?
It wasn't just random cruelty. Remember, this was a time of political instability. The Roman Empire was vast, and keeping control over distant regions like Judea required a delicate balancing act.
Okay.
Herod likely saw Christians as a potential threat,
Oh, okay.
a group that could disrupt the fragile peace.
So by eliminating James, he was making a statement.
Exactly.
Don't even think about challenging my authority.
It was a show of force
Yeah.
intended to instill fear
Right.
and prevent any uprisings.
But Herod didn't stop there, did he?
He did not.
He went after Peter next.
Right?
Throwing him in prison under heavy guard
Yep.
with plans to execute him after Passover. It almost feels personal, like he was targeting the leaders.
You're picking up on something crucial there.
Yeah.
Herod wasn't just trying to squash a movement.
Right.
He was going after its heart.
Right.
By imprisoning Peter, he was aiming to demoralize and decapitate the early church.
And the text really emphasizes how inescapable this prison was.
Yeah.
It mentions Peter being bound with 2 chains
Mhm.
and guarded by 4 quaternions of soldiers.
Okay.
What exactly does that mean?
That's where it gets interesting.
Okay.
A quaternion was a unit of 4 Roman soldiers.
Okay.
So 4 quaternions means 16 soldiers guarding Peter around the clock.
Wow.
It wasn't just a cell.
Yeah.
It was practically a fortress.
No kidding. They were clearly taking no chances with Peter.
No, they were not.
It's like they were saying, escape is impossible.
Right.
But here's where things take an incredible turn.
Okay.
While Peter's locked up, the church is doing something extraordinary.
Yeah.
They're praying fervently for his release.
This detail is so important.
It really is.
It shows the unwavering faith of the
Yeah.
early Christians.
I mean, imagine their fear, their grief over James's death.
Yeah.
And yet, they didn't give up hope.
Right.
They turned to prayer,
Yes.
believing that even in this impossible situation, God could intervene.
It's such a powerful reminder of the importance of prayer,
It is.
especially in times of crisis.
Yeah. But they weren't just praying casually, were they?
No.
The text says they were praying without ceasing.
That's right.
This wasn't a quick bedtime prayer.
Right?
It was a persistent, desperate plea to God,
Yeah.
reflecting their deep faith in their love for Peter.
Absolutely.
It almost makes you wonder, did their constant prayers somehow contribute
That's a fascinating question.
to what happens next?
Yeah.
I mean, we're about to get into Peter's miraculous escape.
Right.
Could it be that their faith, their collective energy, created an environment
It's definitely something to ponder.
where God's power could move more freely?
We can't say for sure,
Right.
But it does make you think about the mysterious ways
I see.
in which prayer might work.
Yeah. But before we jump ahead,
Yeah.
let's talk about the prison itself.
Okay.
We already know it's heavily guarded.
Right.
But what was it like?
Well, Roman prisons were notoriously harsh,
Oh,
dark, damp, and often overcrowded.
oh gosh.
Peter was likely chained in a small, uncomfortable space.
With the constant presence of those guards.
Yeah.
A stark reminder of his captivity.
It must have felt utterly hopeless.
I can imagine so.
And yet, in the midst of all that,
Right.
something incredible happens.
What's that?
An angel appears.
An angel.
A light shines in the prison, and Peter's chains just fall off his hands.
Wow.
Talk about a plot twist.
It's a scene straight out of a Hollywood movie.
It is, isn't it?
But instead of special effects, it's divine intervention
Right.
at play.
And the angel doesn't just free Peter.
Uh-huh.
He gives some specific instructions.
Okay.
Get dressed, put on your sandals, and follow me.
It's almost comical.
I know.
The way the angel guides him through each step,
Yeah.
like a parent helping a sleepy child get ready for school.
Yeah.
But it also highlights that Peter had to participate
Yeah.
in his own rescue.
Right.
He had to choose to follow,
Yeah.
even though he was probably terrified
Right.
and disoriented.
It wasn't just passive.
It was active faith.
Uh-huh.
And then they have to pass through not one,
Right.
but two sets of guards
Okay.
before reaching the Iron Gate.
Yeah.
That leads to the city.
It's like each obstacle was another test of Peter's faith.
Yeah.
Another opportunity for doubt
Right.
to creep in.
And then they just walk out.
Yeah. But at each stage,
Right.
the way is miraculously cleared.
Right.
The guards don't see them.
Right.
The gate opens of its own accord.
It's like they were walking through walls.
It's a powerful reminder
Right.
that when we step out in faith, God often goes before us,
Right.
preparing the way
Yeah.
and removing obstacles we could never overcome on our own.
And then the angel leaves Peter standing in the street alone.
Can you imagine that moment?
It's a moment of both awe and bewilderment.
Right.
Peter's probably thinking,
Yeah.
did that really just happen?
Right.
The full weight of his escape,
Yeah.
the sheer improbability of it all, probably hit him all at once.
I bet.
I can only imagine the mix of emotions.
Relief,
Relief,
disbelief,
disbelief,
maybe even a little bit of lingering
fear.
fear.
Where does he go from there?
Well, naturally.
Yeah.
He heads straight to a familiar place, Mary's house.
Right.
And who do you think he finds there?
Let me guess. The disciples
You got it.
gathered together,
Yeah.
praying for his release.
The very people who were fervently praying for him
Right.
are the ones he runs to in his moment of freedom.
Right.
It's a beautiful image
It is.
of community,
Right.
of shared faith and support.
But it doesn't go quite as smoothly
I know, right?
as you might think.
Tell me, what happens when Peter knocks on the door?
Yeah.
Well, the servant girl, Rhoda, recognizes his voice,
Okay.
but she's so overjoyed
Oh.
that instead of opening the gate,
Uh-huh.
she runs inside to tell everyone.
Hold on. She leaves Peter standing outside
I know.
after he just escaped prison.
It's such a human touch.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
It's like a scene from a sitcom.
A moment of pure joy and disbelief.
It is.
That's so relatable.
So what's the reaction inside?
Well, they think Rhoda's crazy. They're like,
Wait.
you're out of your mind. It can't be Peter.
They don't believe her.
They even suggest it might be his angel at the door.
Wait, his angel?
That's a great question.
What did they believe about angels back then?
Yeah.
Why would they think that?
That's a great question. And it opens a window into their worldview.
Yeah.
In Jewish tradition, it was believed
Right.
that each person had a guardian angel,
Okay.
a spiritual being assigned to protect and guide them.
Okay.
So they thought maybe Peter's angel had taken on his appearance
Oh.
to deliver a message.
Wow. That adds a whole new layer to the story.
Right.
But they're not just skeptical.
Right.
They're grappling with the possibility of the supernatural.
Exactly.
But I'm guessing Peter doesn't just give up and walk away.
Of course not. He keeps knocking, and finally, they open the door.
Can you imagine their faces?
Oh! The shock.
The shock.
The joy.
The sheer disbelief.
It must have been a moment of pure, unadulterated amazement.
Right.
Like something out of a movie.
It is, isn't it?
The hero returns against all odds.
You got it.
But we're only halfway through the chapter.
Right.
What happens next?
Well, that's a story for part 2.
Okay, sounds good.
But let's pause and take a moment to reflect on what we've learned so far.
Okay, that's a great idea.
There's so much packed into these first few verses.
There is.
It's like a whirlwind of action and emotion.
We've seen the brutality of Herod's persecution,
Right.
the unwavering faith of the early church,
Absolutely.
and the miraculous power of God at work.
You got it.
And we've seen how even in the darkest of moments,
Right.
there's always room for hope, for faith,
Mhm.
and for the unexpected interventions of God.
But the story doesn't end there.
Okay.
The chapter takes a sudden turn.
Oh. Shifting the focus
All right.
from Peter's escape to Herod's own fate.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued.
Yeah.
This deep dive just keeps getting more and more interesting.
It does.
We'll have to pick up the story there in the next part.
Okay.
But for now, what's something you think our listeners should really take away
I think the biggest takeaway is the power of prayer.
from what we've discussed so far?
Even when faced with seemingly impossible circumstances,
Right.
the early Christians never stopped praying.
Yeah.
And look what happened.
It worked.
Peter was miraculously delivered from prison.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that prayer can move mountains.
Right.
Even when we can't see how.
Absolutely. And I think it's also important to remember the role of community.
Yes,
The
absolutely.
disciples weren't going through this alone.
Right.
They had each other and they have their faith
Yeah.
to support them.
Well said.
Yeah.
So for all of you listening,
Right.
next time you're facing a challenge, remember the power of prayer and the importance of leaning on your community for support.
Right.
You never know what miracles might be waiting around the corner.
Well, don't go anywhere.
Right.
We'll be back soon to continue our deep dive into Acts 12 and uncover what happened to King Herod. Welcome back. We left off with Peter's dramatic escape from prison chains, falling off gates, swinging open the whole work. It's enough to make you wonder if he had a guardian angel on speed dial.
You know, it's fascinating how this story blends history and faith so seamlessly. We have this very real account of Roman imprisonment and then, bam, a miraculous intervention. It really speaks to the power of belief in those times.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But let's not forget King Herod. We left him fuming. I'm sure after discovering Peter's escape, what was his reaction?
Well, the text tells us Herod went on a bit of a rampage. He interrogated the guards, ordered their execution, and basically threw a royal tantrum.
Wow, talk about not taking the news. Well, I've always thought of Herod as this larger-than-life, almost cartoonish villain, but was he really that unstable?
That's a great point. It's easy to fall into those stereotypes. But remember, these were incredibly stressful times for rulers like Herod. They were constantly under pressure from both Rome and their own people. One wrong move could cost them everything.
So Peter's escape wasn't just a personal embarrassment. It was a political blow. It made Herod look weak and incompetent.
Exactly. It undermined his authority and challenged his control over the region. Imagine trying to maintain order in a volatile place like Judea with everyone whispering about miraculous prison breaks and divine intervention. It wouldn't exactly inspire confidence in your leadership.
No kidding. So what did Herod do next? Did he just give up on finding Peter and focus on damage control?
Well, the narrative takes a sudden turn, one that's both surprising and a bit unsettling. Instead of dwelling on Peter's escape, the story shifts to Herod's own demise.
Whoa, hold on. We're going from a miraculous prison break to how does Herod meet his end?
It's described in pretty vivid detail. The text says Herod was in Caesarea addressing a delegation from Tyre and Sidon when the crowd started praising him.
Okay, I'm picturing myself in that crowd. What was so special about Herod that they started praising him like that?
Well, according to the account, Herod was decked out in his finest royal attire, and his speech was apparently quite impressive. But here's the kicker. The crowd starts shouting, "This is the voice of a god, not a man."
Wait, seriously, they thought he was a god?
It sounds a bit over the top to our modern ears, doesn't it? But
Yeah.
in that cultural context, rulers were often seen as divine representatives, intermediaries between the gods and the people.
So while they might not have literally believed Herod was Zeus or Apollo, they were attributing a divine aura to him, recognizing his power and authority.
That's a great way to put it, but here's where things get really interesting. Instead of rebuking the crowd, correcting their misperception, Herod basks in their adulation. He accepts their worship.
Wow, what a contrast. This is the same Herod who imprisoned and executed Christians for their faith, and now he's the one accepting glory that belongs only to God.
It's almost ironic, isn't it? It's incredibly ironic, and the consequences of his hubris are swift and severe. The text tells us that an angel of the Lord struck Herod, and he died a gruesome death, eaten by worms.
Okay, that's pretty intense. It's not exactly a subtle ending. What are we supposed to make of this? Was it a literal act of divine judgment?
That's a question that has been debated for centuries. Some interpret it as a direct consequence of Herod's actions, a punishment for his pride and his persecution of the Christians. Others see it as a natural, albeit horrific, death that just happened to coincide with his acceptance of divine praise.
So there's room for interpretation, but either way, it's a pretty stark reminder that we're all accountable to a higher power.
Exactly. It raises profound questions about the nature of power, the consequences of our choices, and the ultimate authority of God.
You know, it's amazing to me how this chapter goes from intense action to deep theological reflection in just a few verses. It's like a roller coaster ride.
It certainly keeps you on your toes, but amidst all this drama and tragedy, there's a thread of hope running through the entire chapter.
Oh, absolutely. I was just thinking about that. Despite the persecution, the imprisonment, even the execution of James, the Christian community continued to grow and flourish.
That's right. The very last verse of the chapter tells us the word of God continued to spread and flourish. It's a testament to the resilience and enduring power of the Christian message.
It's like saying, you can imprison our leaders, you can try to silence us, but you can't stop the spread of faith.
Exactly. And that's a powerful message for us today as well. We may face challenges, we may encounter opposition, but ultimately truth will prevail.
It's a message of hope and perseverance that transcends time and continues to inspire believers centuries later. But before we wrap up this section, I have to ask, what about Peter? Where does he go after his escape? What becomes of him?
Well, the text doesn't go into detail about Peter's immediate plans, but we know from later chapters in Acts that he continued to play a vital role in the early church teaching and spreading the gospel message.
So even though he was targeted and imprisoned, Herod's plan ultimately backfired. Peter's escape became a symbol of hope and divine intervention.
You could say that, and it set the stage for even greater things to come, but that's a story for another deep dive.
Agree. We've covered a lot of ground in this section, from Herod's rage to his dramatic demise and the unwavering growth of the early church. It's amazing how much depth and complexity is packed into these few verses.
It's a testament to the power of Scripture. Each time we revisit these stories, we uncover new layers of meaning and insight.
For all of you listening, as we transition to the final part of our deep dive, I encourage you to reflect on what we've discussed so far. What stands out to you? What questions are stirring in your heart?
We'll be back soon to explore some of the finer details and deeper implications of Acts 12. So until then, keep those thoughts brewing.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Acts 12. We've witnessed James's execution, Peter's miraculous escape, and Herod's dramatic downfall. It's a whirlwind of events.
It is.
But I think it's worth taking a closer look
Right.
at some of the details we might have missed.
I agree. Sometimes it's the seemingly small details that reveal the most profound insights.
Yeah, what specifically caught your eye?
Yeah.
Well, I keep coming back to that image of Peter
Okay.
sleeping between two soldiers,
Right.
bound with chains. Here he is,
Yeah.
facing imminent execution,
Right.
and yet he's sleeping peacefully.
Wow.
It just struck me as so profound.
It's a detail that's easy to overlook, isn't it?
It is.
But you're right. It speaks volumes
Right.
about Peter's state of mind.
Yeah.
It suggests a level of trust
Right.
and surrender
Yeah,
that's almost incomprehensible to us.
exactly. It's like he's saying, okay, God, I've done all I can do. The rest is up to you.
Mhm.
He's not pacing the cell.
Right.
He's not trying to hatch an escape plan. He's resting in the midst of chaos.
And that brings us to another interesting detail.
Okay.
The angel striking Peter on the side
Right.
to wake him up. It's such a specific action,
Right.
almost jarring in its immediacy. Why do you think the author chose to include that detail?
You know, I've always wondered about that. It almost feels like a divine wake-up call, a sense of urgency, like Peter, snap out of it. We've got work to do.
I think you're onto something there.
Right?
It emphasizes that this wasn't just a dream,
Right.
a passive vision. It was a call to action.
Right.
Peter had to choose to follow the angel to participate in his own rescue.
And the instructions the angel gives him are so specific. Get dressed,
Yeah.
put on your sandals, wrap your cloak around you, and follow me. It's almost like a parent
Right.
getting a sleepy child ready to go out.
There's a tenderness, there isn't there?
Oh,
a
yeah.
gentle guidance
Yeah.
amidst the extraordinary circumstances. But it also highlights the fact that
Yeah.
even in divine interventions, there's an element of human responsibility.
Right.
Peter had to choose to cooperate to take those steps, even though he didn't fully understand what was happening.
And then they have to pass through those two sets of guards, remember?
Oh, yeah.
Each one a potential obstacle, a moment where they could be discovered.
Right.
It's like each step heightened the suspense, the improbability of it all.
But each time the way is miraculously clear,
Mm.
the guards don't see them.
Ah,
The gate opens of its own accord.
well, yeah.
It's as if the very environment was
Right.
bending to God's will, making way for Peter's escape.
It's a powerful reminder
Right.
that when we step out in faith,
Yeah.
when we follow God's leading, even when it doesn't make sense, He often goes before us, preparing the way and removing obstacles we could never overcome on our own.
And this theme of divine intervention versus human ambition really comes into sharp focus when we contrast Peter's escape with Herod's demise.
That's a great point. It's like two sides of the same coin.
Right.
Isn't it Peter, the humble servant, is miraculously delivered,
Right.
while Herod, the power-hungry king, is struck down?
Exactly. Herod tries to control everything,
Yeah.
to manipulate events to his advantage.
Right.
He persecutes the Christians.
Ah.
He imprisons Peter. And in the end, he even tries to usurp the glory
Right.
that belongs to God.
And it ultimately leads to his downfall.
Yeah.
It's a sobering reminder that true power doesn't lie in earthly authority
Right.
or control, but in surrendering to a higher purpose.
And that's where the message of Acts 12 really resonates, I think.
It does.
Despite the persecution, the imprisonment, the very real threat of death,
Yeah.
the early Christians remained steadfast in their faith.
Right.
They prayed without ceasing, they supported each other,
Right.
and they continued to spread the word of God.
And in the end, it was their faith, their unwavering belief in God's power,
Right.
that triumphed. It's a message that continues to inspire and challenge us today.
Absolutely. It reminds us that even in the face of seemingly impossible odds,
Right.
even when surrounded by darkness
Right.
and uncertainty, there's always hope.
And that hope is found not in our own strength or ingenuity, but in the power of a God who can move mountains, open prison doors, and ultimately overcome even death itself.
It's been an incredible journey exploring this chapter with you.
It really has.
I always find new depths and nuances every time I revisit it.
Me too. And I think that's the beauty of Scripture. It's a living, breathing text that continues to speak to us across centuries and cultures.
So to everyone listening, we encourage you to read Acts 12 for yourselves, to delve into its details, to wrestle with its challenges, and to discover the timeless truths that resonate with your own life and experiences.
And remember, no matter what challenges you face, no matter how dark the night may seem, the God who delivered Peter from prison is still at work in the world today. He is a God of miracles, a God of hope, and a God who is always with us even to the very end of the age.